When we're solving inequalities with variables on both sides, I like to follow these steps. This is not the only way to solve these problems, but this is just one way. So I choose to do any distributive property or like terms to simplify each side of the inequality separately. And then once there's nothing else I can simplify, then I start solving the inequality. And then if it asks for it, make sure you graph your solution. So I'm just going to choose one correct way to solve each of these problems, but keep in mind that there are more ways that you could choose to solve these and still get the same correct answer. For the first one, I typically choose to move my variable to the left-hand side for no other reason than it makes it easier if I need to graph it. So I'm going to do that for these. So on this one, I need to get these like terms together. So the x with the other x. Because they're on opposite sides of the inequality, I need to do inverse operations. So the opposite of a positive 3 is going to be minus or negative 3x. And then we do once on the right-hand side, once on the left-hand side. And notice I lined it up underneath the like term. So an x with an x and an x with an x over here. And then 5x minus 3x is 2x. Then I drop down everything else. So minus 7 is less than positive 9. Make sure you're bringing everything straight down so we don't end up with something on the wrong side of the inequality. Now that there's nothing else I can simplify, no more like terms or distributive property, I'm just going to solve the inequality. So the opposite of minus 7 is plus 7 on both sides. So it's going to give me 2x is less than 16. And then the 2 is multiplying the x, so the opposite of multiplying is to divide both sides by 2. And even though I divided, I did not divide by a negative, so that sign's going to stay the same. And then 16 divided by 2 is 8. For the next one, I'm seeing some distributive properties, so I'm going to do this distributive property first to simplify. So that's going to give me negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. And negative 2 times a negative 5 is a positive 10. And then I'm going to drop down everything else. So I'm done with distributive property, but I still see like terms on the left-hand side. So I'm going to combine those like terms. Again, because they're on the same side of the inequality, I can just add those like terms as is. So positive 10, positive 7 is positive 17. It's only when those like terms are on opposite sides that I have to do the opposite. For example, if I wanted to combine the 7 with the 12, I would have to minus 7 from both sides, or minus 12 from both sides. Because they're on opposite sides, I would have to use opposite operations. Okay, so I did positive 10, positive 7 makes 17. Everything else is staying the same for right now. So now my only like terms are on opposite sides. So now I'm going to start solving. So I want to get this positive 17. I want to move it over to the positive 12. Because I'm going to the opposite side, I need to use my inverse or opposite operation. So the opposite of positive 17 is negative 17. And again, that's because I'm going past that inequality sign. Negative 6x is greater than, because we only flip this when we're multiplying or dividing by a negative. So it's okay to have a negative to subtract. And then positive 12, negative 17 is negative 5. And then the 6 is multiplying the x, so the opposite is to divide by negative 6 on both sides. And then here, because I divided by negative 6, that means I have to flip the inequality sign. So it's going to, instead of greater than, it's going to be less than. And then I can't divide 5 by 6 evenly, so I can leave the fraction, but negative divided by negative will make it positive. Next one. Again, I want to do distributive property first. I'm going to do this distributive property first. 1/2 times x is 1/2 x. And 1/2 times 8 is 4. And I'm going to keep everything else the same. I haven't touched anything else yet. And then no more distributive property. But as I'm looking at the left-hand side, I notice that I have some like terms on the same side. So positive 4 and negative 3. Again, because they're on the same side of the inequality, I can just leave those as is and say positive 4 minus 3 is a positive 1. and then nothing on the left and nothing on the right that I can do to simplify. So now I'm going to start solving. So I'm going to subtract the 3/4 from both sides. And again, that's because I like to move my variable over to the left if possible. So I have 1/2 minus 3/4. 1/2, if we turn this into a common denominator, is the same thing as 2/4. Multiply both by 2. So we'll really do 2/4 minus 3/4 is negative 1/4 x. Or instead of doing common denominator, you could just put 1/2 minus 3/4 in your calculator. That works as well. Then I still have plus 1 is less than 1. And then we just keep solving. So I got to get rid of this positive 1. So I have minus 1 from both sides. And then 1 minus 1 happens to be 0. And that's okay to end up with a 0. That doesn't mean we made a mistake. And then x is still being multiplied by negative 1/4. So the opposite is to divide by negative 1/4. Or remember, you can multiply by the reciprocal. We're going to divide both sides by negative 1/4. And because I divided by a negative, that inequality sign is going to flip around and become greater than. And then 0 divided by negative 1/4 is just 0. So if you end up with a 0 in a problem, don't think you made a mistake, and that doesn't mean there's no solution. It just means the answer could be 0. Okay. For this one, I'm going to choose to minus 2 from both sides. I could have also done plus 4x on both sides, but again, I like to move my variables to the left. Negative 4x and positive 2x is negative 2x. Again, I'm not going to flip my sign because I haven't multiplied or divided by a negative. And I'm going to make sure I bring this minus sign down because it's attached to that 3. And then we continue solving. Opposite of plus 9 is minus 9. And then negative 3, negative 9 makes negative 12. These are multiplying, so the opposite is to divide by negative 2. And then because we're multiplying or dividing by a negative, that inequality sign flips around. So the less than or equal to becomes greater than or equal to. And then we divide here, we get positive 6. And then just for some practice, I could put 6 on my number line, count at least 1 on either side. This would be a filled in circle because it has that equal to part. And values for x that are greater than 6, the numbers that are bigger are to the right. This one I have some like terms here, and they're both x terms. So again, because they're on the same side of that inequality, I'm going to leave them just how they are and add them together. So negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3x. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to do that distributive property. So that's going to be 2x, and 2 times 5 is positive 10. And then I'm going to start solving since there's no more simplifying that I can do. So I'm going to minus 2 from both sides. So this is where we have to do inverse. So unlike the negative 8 and the positive 5 that I just left the same, this positive 2 and negative 3 are on opposite sides. So this is why I have to do the opposite and say minus 2 instead of positive 2. And that's going to give me negative 5x. Still have that plus 7 to drop down. I'm going to drop down the inequality sign. I'm going to drop down the positive 10. Again, make sure everything's coming straight down so we don't end up with the inequality in the wrong spot. And then to get rid of this plus 7, we're going to minus 7. 10 minus 7 is 3. And then the last step is to get rid of this multiplying by negative 5, so we divide by negative 5. X is, I'm dividing by negative, so instead of greater than, it's going to flip to less than. And I can't divide 3 by 5 evenly, so we can just leave it as a fraction. But I do tend to move that negative sign up to the top so I don't forget about it. So instead of 3 over negative 5, it's the same thing as negative 3 over positive 5, as long as there's a single negative sign. And then on the last one, this one's going to be a little bit much with some fractions, but we'll go through it step by step and then make sure you're using your calculator, and that helps with those fractions a lot. So I'm going to distribute and that's going to give me 2/5 x and minus 6/5. We still have that plus 4. I'm going to go ahead and do distributive property on the right side too. So 1/2 times x is half x, and 1/2 times 1 is also 1/2. Then I have some like terms I can combine. So I can combine this minus 6/5 and this positive 4. And I would take your calculator and say negative 6/5 plus 4, and that's going to be 14/5. Everything else is going to drop straight down. And then now there's no more like terms, no more distributive property, I'm going to start solving. So I'm going to move this minus 1/2 over. So it was positive, so the opposite is minus or negative, to make that go away. And again, if we use our calculus, it's going to make this a little bit easier. 2/5 minus 1/2, and that should give us negative 1/10 x. Then I still have this plus 14/5 greater than or equal to, and then the 1/2. And then we need to, opposite of plus 14/5 is minus 14/5 on both sides, minus 14/5. To make it 0 for here, we're going to continue this problem over here. So it's going to be negative 1/10 x. And again, if you use your calculator, that's going to make this a whole lot easier. And then we're going to take the 1/2 and minus 14/5, and that's going to be negative 23/10. Again, if you use your calculator, it's going to make it a whole lot easier. We have one last step. So this negative 1/10 is multiplying x. So the opposite is to divide by negative 1/10, or you can multiply by the reciprocal. That works just as well to make that go away. So then x is, and now because we're dividing by negative, we're going to flip the sign around. So instead of greater than or equal to, it can become less than or equal to. And again, use your calculator, it's going to make this a whole lot easier. Negative 23/10 divided by negative 1/10, and that's going to give us a positive 23.